And I'm just going to delve right into the questions. I'll introduce you here real quick, and then we'll just get going. And everything else I'm going to just do on the show based, and I'll fill in with
Great.
whatever we need.
Yep.
All right. All right, here we go. All right, Tony, you have a lot of experience working in law through your practice, and I know you've done a lot of other things as well. How does your experience play into the role of becoming a Superior Court 3 judge?
Well, Nick, I've been an attorney for 23 years, most of that time practicing here in Kosciuszko County. I've been a deputy prosecuting attorney, I've been a defense attorney, I've represented plaintiffs, petitioners, and defended civil cases. So all of that experience plays into the Superior Court judge role very easily, in that Superior Court 3 is a court of general jurisdiction. It handles criminal matters such as OWIs causing death and serious bodily injury, as well as civil matters in the small claims court, such as landlord-tenant law and those types of disputes. So I have experience with all those areas of law. I've handled multiple felonies, hundreds of felony cases as defense attorney, even more as a prosecuting attorney. And I was specifically assigned to that court as a deputy prosecuting attorney. So I'm familiar with the role, of the prosecutor, and I've defended cases in that court as well. So I know what's required in defending those cases. Early in my career, I represented tenants mostly in landlord-tenant disputes when I was working with legal services in Fort Wayne. So I'm also familiar, very in the details of landlord-tenant law, which is a big part of Superior Court 3.
Okay. The Superior Court 3 judge deals, as you just mentioned, with a multitude of cases. Most notably, though, a lot of small claims cases go through that. What do you see as being some of the best qualities of a judge handling cases like these, and why do you think you best fit that role?
Small claims court is a big part of Superior Court 3. They have a large backlog at this point of landlord-tenant disputes and evictions, in large part due to the pandemic causing a backlog. There was a moratorium in place where evictions couldn't take place. That's been lifted. Some of those restrictions have been lifted. So there is a big backlog that need to be dealt with. I think my experience suits me well in that I've been a mediator for 6 years now. To be a mediator, you have to go through a 40-hour course to deal with mediation. You have some classroom component of that, but you also have role playing. And since that time, I've handled over 60 mediations as a mediator. The mediator's role is similar to that of a small claims judge in that you're hearing the dispute from both parties. The rules of evidence don't strictly apply in small claims, and the judge, has the opportunity to ask questions directly of the people who are participating in small claims cases. So I think my experience as a mediator has allowed me to delve beyond what people are demanding and try to get to what their real concerns are. And I think that would be critical for a small claims judge.
Okay. What would you consider as some of the pros and cons of moving to the bench as compared to practicing law and representing either a single person or a single party?
Well, there's a key difference there. As an attorney, you are an advocate for your client. So you are in an adversarial setting. You're pushing specifically for one particular outcome, that of your client. The pro there is that you have contact with a lot of people on a day-to-day basis, your client base, opposing counsel, that sort of thing. But you're in a very specific role advocating for someone. As a judge, you're in a completely different role in that you need to remain neutral, you need to be able to listen to both sides of a dispute, you need to take in the evidence, rule on the evidence if necessary, and consider all of those factors. So they're very different roles for starters. Pros and cons, as an attorney you do have a lot of contact with people on a day-to-day basis. As a judge you're somewhat removed from the day-to-day contact with the individuals involved with the system, and for a very good reason, because you need to remain neutral and unbiased. But that also could be seen as a con because you don't have the same amount of contact with the individuals. A judge's role is probably a bit more administrative than what that is of a practicing attorney. And perhaps more administrative may be a misnomer or a misconception in that you're administering things just in a different way. As a judge, you're overseeing the court, you're presiding over proceedings, you're dealing with attorneys, you're ruling on motions, that sort of thing. Whereas an attorney, you're administering your individual cases and managing your cases and managing your law practice. So there are positives and negatives, from both positions.
Okay. If you were presented with a case that may involve something you may not be familiar with, how would you go about getting yourself prepared for a case like that?
Even as a practicing attorney, we often see new circumstances, and new types of cases come through the door. Most of us attorneys are experienced in researching, whether it be through Westlaw or Lexis or case maker through the State Bar Association. So most likely I would begin just by hitting the books, figuratively speaking, and nowadays online research, that sort of thing. But as sitting judges, judges also have the resources of the state judiciary downstate. And any judge who is elected to office is required to go to judges school. You know, now it's a 2-week course shortly after they take the bench. It's usually scheduled once or twice a year. And that is a course that prepares you, to administer your court, but it also gives you resources that you can call or online resources that you can access when you have an area of law that you're unfamiliar with. And locally, our local judges and bar are very good about sharing information. I wouldn't have any problem, walking down the hall to talk to one of the other 4 judges in the county, and ask, hey, I got this new case, I've done a little bit of research, this is one of my concerns, can you share your experiences with me or point me in the right direction? So continuing to learn the process, reaching out to, whether it be downstate to the resources there, online resources, or even our human resources in the building, that's probably the best way to get familiar with cases that you're otherwise not familiar with.
Okay. Why should the voters of Kosciuszko County choose you over your opponent?
Well, I believe I have more experience than my opponent. I've been practicing for 23 years as opposed to his 14 years. I've been a deputy prosecuting attorney and a defense attorney. I don't believe he's ever served as a prosecuting attorney, and that's a whole different perspective on the criminal cases. As a prosecuting attorney, you work with law enforcement, you see the charges come through, you may have to approve search warrants in the middle of the night, and that sort of thing. So it gives you the entirely different perspective on a criminal proceeding. And then, as a prosecuting attorney, when you go into trial, you have the burden of proving your case. So you have to do all the research, you have to gather all the evidence, you have to present your evidence in the appropriate manner and make sure that your evidence gets in, that you lay the proper foundations, and that sort of thing. So working as a deputy prosecuting attorney has given me, I believe, an advantage over my opponent as it relates to being able to handle criminal cases from the judge's perspective, because I understand both what the prosecutor is trying to accomplish as well as what the defense counsel is trying to accomplish. I also have 6 years experience as a mediator. I don't believe my opponent is a mediator at this point. So I've handled over 60 mediations, and he's, as I said, not a mediator. I've handled civil cases for over 23 years as well. Family law matters, adoptions, guardianships. I'm also appointed as a guardian ad litem, which means that I then represent the interests of the children. So that then gives me another perspective, for the people coming before the court, and what needs to be done, to consider all the aspects of the people coming before the court. Going back to the role as deputy prosecutor, you also then have to deal with the victims of the crime, in that role, and prepare them for court or the potential outcomes of court. And again, I don't believe that my opponent has had that experience in dealing with the victims of crime to the same extent that I have. And that's often the most difficult part of the job, dealing with a person who's lost a loved one to a drunk driver or something of that nature, and explaining to them the process, why it takes so long, why things are going to go the way they are, and then what ultimately the result is, whether it's favorable or unfavorable.
Okay.
Thank you.
And is there anything else you'd like the voters to know?
Just by way of background, I was born and raised in Kosciuszko County, graduated Warsaw High School, attended Iowa State University, and then went to law school at IU in Bloomington. So I'm a local guy, born and raised. My parents still live here. My brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, the majority of them are still here. So I have a lot of ties to the community. I've done lots of community service by way of board service. At one point or another, I've served on the United Way Board, community service, or combined community services, Baker Youth Club, Kosciuszko County Community Foundation, and a handful of other boards. Currently, I'm on the Community Corrections Board, which oversees the programs that are run by community corrections, including drug court and home detention programs, as well as the community transition program for those who are coming out of prison to transition them back into society. I'm also on the Sheriff's Merit Board. I'm the Sheriff's appointee to the Merit Board. And the Merit Board has 2 purposes really. One, to oversee the pension fund for the Sheriff's deputies. That's one of the primary roles. The other role is to oversee the hiring and discipline of Sheriff's deputies. If the Sheriff is going to impose any kind of discipline that would last more than 15 days, he's required to bring a case in front of the merit board. That being the case, then the facts would be presented almost in a quasi-trial fashion to the merit board, and the merit board would then decide, what happens to the officer, what punishment is appropriate, if any, and that sort of thing. So there's been a lot of talk in the media about, accountability for law enforcement. I believe our county does a fairly good job of that, through the merit board system. On the sheriff's department, we already have mechanisms in place to help address those issues.
All right. Well, Tony, I appreciate you coming in to talk about this, and best of luck to you in the election.
Thank you, Nick.